After Rockstar their success of previous games, in September of 1999 they wanted to build something new. You see, GTA 1 and 2 used a 2D flat top-down perspective where you looked straight down at the roofs of cars and buildings. They wanted to take things to the next level and switch from a 2D to a 3D open world. They wanted to release the game on the upcoming Ps2, which at the time wasn't even made yet. The developers had to build a brand new 3D open world, which they had never done before, and release it on a console they knew absolutely nothing about. So how in the world did they still manage to do it? Well, because they had never done such thing before, the developers were constantly breaking and rebuilding the game. This meant constantly throwing away weeks of work and starting over. Teams worked 12 to 16 hour days, 6 to 7 days a week, sometimes even sleeping at the office. But despite that, the game they had built changed the gaming industry forever and laid the foundation for every other GTA that was still to come. At the start of development, Rockstar knew the PS1 couldn't handle the 3D open world they wanted to create, so they started looking for stronger consoles and found the Sega Dreamcast. But despite that hardware being capable of running the game, Sega was slowly losing the console war at the time, so Rockstar couldn't risk releasing their biggest, most anticipated game on a failing console. In the early 2000s, Sony was already handing out prototype PS2 consoles to game development studios to prepare their upcoming games for the new console. Once Rockstar realized how massive the PS2's hype launch was going to be, and after they got their hands on the prototypes to see what the machine could do, they immediately dropped the Dreamcast version after only 4 months of prototyping. They ordered the entire team to focus exclusively on Sony's new PS2. Now, because the final console wasn't finished yet, those early prototypes were pretty unstable. The hardware specifications that the finalized console would have were constantly changing. This meant a programmer could spend an entire month writing a complex code to make a car crash, but when Sony suddenly changed the hardware, that entire month of code would become completely useless. To fix this, Rockstar used a software called renderware, which you can see as a code translator. When a game comes out, it releases on multiple consoles, but as you guys know, each one has a different hardware. Rockstar built a main neutral code for the entire game. Then the renderware translates that into different codes to make sure that the game's compatible for multiple consoles. This way they don't have to constantly rebuild the game for each console, saving them years of work. But obviously, while building the game, you still have to make sure it actually fits within the hardware limits of those consoles. And this is where Rockstar faced their first problem. They had to fit a 9 square kilometer map on only 32 megabytes of RAM, which they knew would be impossible. So unlike GTA 1 and 2 that always had the full map loaded while playing, for GTA 3 they had to use asset streaming and cooling. I've been getting a lot of questions from people on how I edit my videos, so I made a small course that contains the full step-by-step process combined with one-on-one coaching from me to grow your channel. If you're interested, I added a link to it in the description down below. Now back to the video. But as it loaded new and deleted old pieces behind the player, the memory started to glitch, leaving tiny gaps of empty data scattered everywhere, to the point where the memory would become so disorganized that the game would simply crash. They also had to simulate gravity, weight, car suspension and impact in 3 dimensions. So instead of figuring everything out on their own, they hired a specialized math and physics expert named Overmaish. He coded a complex physics system entirely from scratch. Nowadays, developers can just check a box in a modern game engine to turn on physics. But back then, most 3D driving games were arcade racers. In those games, a car was treated by the computer as a solid flat box sliding across a floor. Vermaish changed everything by programming 4-wheel independent suspension. His code treated the car as 5 separate objects, the main body and 4 individual wheels. Each wheel had its own math calculating how hard it was pushing against the ground. So if you drove your front left tire over a curb, only that tire reacted. The springs and shocks would compress, pushing the body of the car upward, while the other 3 tires stay flat on the ground. This is why the cars in GTA 3 felt so heavy and satisfying. And back in 2001, seeing a car behave in such a way in an open world blew everyone's minds. But simulating suspension is one thing. Calculating what actually happens when a car hits a wall at 80 miles per hour is something else. To do this, he used basic shapes called bounding boxes. He put them around each object in the game, and if those boxes overlapped, the code instantly calculated the weight and the angle of the car to decide how far it should bounce backward and how much damage it should take. What makes this truly impressive is the fact that he had to fit all of those physics on roughly 1 megabyte. To give you an idea, a 5-second short video you record on your phone is 50 times larger than the entire entire code of script. This was the first time ever the developers at Rockstar had to build a 3D world. So in the beginning they had to figure a few things out. Building Liberty City was one of the biggest bottlenecks in the game's development. It took a team of artists and programmers over a year of constant work just to get the layout functioning. The designers couldn't just draw a 3D world, so instead they built it out of individual 3D blocks. They used a software called 3D Studio Max. They designed a few standard road pieces, skyscrapers, bridges, sidewalks and trees. Then they took all those individual pieces and put them together inside an internal map editor to create the 3 islands. But this is only the beginning, because now you have to make it alive. The game contains around 90 pedestrians, and each one of them constantly gets reused. If you've ever played the game yourself, you probably thought this was a glitch, but they actually did that to save space. The code managing the whole map was written in C++. On top of that, the programmers wrote custom code that constantly talked to the Ps2 DVD drive, telling the laser exactly where to move to read the next chunk of the map as the player drove around. But to create a traffic simulation, they laid down invisible lanes on every road. Then the AI traffic code forced civilian cars to lock onto these lines. They did the same for sidewalks, creating a web of paths that told civilians where they were allowed to walk or stand. But when the map was almost finalized, the developers still experienced some bugs. If a street was too straight or long, the player could drive down on it so fast that they would outrun the speed of the DVD laser. So the code wouldn't be able to load the buildings fast enough. To fix this, they added sharp 90-degree roads. This way the player constantly has to slow down, and it also helped in creating the illusion that the map seems bigger than it actually is. But doing this meant they had to rebuild the entire map, because like I said, each building has a 3D bounding box. If one is slightly moved, it will overlap with the other. So if one building moves, the others must go too. And amidst all of this, the clock was ticking. They wanted to publish the game in October 2001. Just by looking at all these things the developers had to keep in mind, to me it's not a surprise that it was a total chaos to build this game. But like I said before, Rockstar always finds a way. As the October deadline approached, the team of roughly 60 to 80 developers were working 7 days a week to fix hundreds of bugs that were causing the console to crash. Then on October 22 in 2001, it finally launched exclusively on the PS2. And just like every other GTA game, it became an instant hit. And 1 year later, it launched on Xbox. The game went over to sell 14.5 million copies worldwide in its lifetime, for a game that programmers originally thought was too complex to make. But this was just the beginning of their crazy development cycle. If you're interested in how they made GTA 4 and later GTA 5, then you can watch my other videos to see how they did it. Now this is it for today's video. I really want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.